Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. Glad to be back with you for another week of podcasting. Sorry I wasn't with you guys last week. I was out doing the Christmas stuff just like probably everybody else was. So I appreciate you guys coming in. If you're watching on TikTok, I appreciate you watching there. If you're not watching on TikTok, I'm glad you're just tuning in however you're getting the podcast. So just to give you a heads up, I do record this on TikTok Live, and then upload it to all the podcast catchers. So if you're out there, I would really appreciate if you could follow me on all the social platforms: TikTok, Twitter. I do Facebook, Instagram, do all those things. So like I said, if you're out there and you're wanting to follow me on all those places, you can find me. Just look up Justin Strawn, and you should be able to do so. Also, if you are listening on the podcast catchers, or if you're on YouTube, because I get a lot of interaction on YouTube as well, if you could do me a favor and just hit like, subscribe, do all that type of stuff, that would help me out a lot as well. And if you're on a podcast catcher, if you can review, it helps me out even more. All right, so we are going to talk a little bit about the Mississippi State basketball team. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them because it's not been that much of the last couple of games have been relatively simple. As they get ready to head into conference play, we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Volume 2, Season 5 of Stranger Things. I'll give you my thoughts on it. For the most part, pretty happy with it. There are some issues that I know a lot of people are having with it, and I'll discuss some of those as well. So we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. And then at the end of the podcast, we'll talk a little bit about Pluribus. Later on this week, I'm hoping probably maybe on either Thursday or Friday to do another podcast. We'll talk about the Mayo Bowl, the Duke's Mayo Bowl there. We'll also talk about the college football playoffs then as well. So we've got a lot going on this week, and we need to go ahead and get into it. So, all right, Mississippi State basketball team, the men's team, ended up beating, for the first time, a lesser opponent and absolutely crushing them like they should have done with some of the other opponents earlier this year. So they actually ended up beating Alabama State 94-56. Everybody played well. I mean, if you go up and down the stat line, pretty much everybody on the team played well. Obviously, Josh Hubbard led the team. He had 22 points, was 9 of 13 from the field, 4 of 7 from three-point range. Jaden Nips, this is one of his worst games. He only had 6 points, but the rest of the team kind of steps up. Quincy Bauer has 8. Chor has 11. Shura has 9. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And one of the things I do like, the one thing I think that might be the biggest takeaway from this is Sean Jones went back to coming off the bench. He's been starting pretty much every game since the season started, and this was the first time that the Bulldogs decided to go ahead and bring him off the bench. So, like I said, I've been kind of hoping that they might do that because I just don't know that Sean Jones is the type of player that can be a starter on an SEC caliber team. So I think he could be a solid bench contributor, but I just haven't really seen enough from him to think that this a starting role is good for him. And I'm glad to see that they've now moved him into Christians has moved him back to the bench, where I think he can probably contribute a little bit better. Look, it's not going to get any easier. Mississippi State is 8-5. They are going to have to play incredibly well to get into the NCAA tournament, and if they are able to do so, I don't know, but they're going to have to play at a really, really high level to be able to even have a chance at the NCAA tournament at this point. Their net ranking is not good. Let me see if I can find it real quick. But last time I checked, they were the lowest rated SEC team, and it wasn't relatively close either. So, like I said, it's going to be difficult for them to find their way into the NCAA tournament. It would probably take 11 or 12 wins. And as much as I like what Christians has done as the coach, they've not come anywhere close to getting 11 or 12 wins at this point. Right now, Mississippi State sitting at 123 in the net rankings. My guess is that won't change much after last night. It may even go down because Alabama State's way down there. But look, you can win some games if you can start playing a little bit better. Alabama State's not good. I mean, they're not. I'm not going to sit there and try to say they're world beaters, but you beat a really bad team really badly. And that's about all that you can really hope for when you play a team similar to what we had with Alabama State. Like I said, they did what they were supposed to. They came out and they pounded a really bad team. It was kind of close for about the first 10 minutes in the game last night, and then Mississippi State eventually just pulled away, and Alabama State never really got back into it. So the women are also going to be playing this weekend. They start their SEC play on Thursday, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll be very interested to see what happens with the Mississippi State women, just simply because I mentioned this earlier. They have a great record. They've only lost one game this year, but their schedule is really, really weak. And that's going to be the one thing that's going to be hurting them if they don't end up, getting 8, 9, 10 wins in SEC play. It's going to be very hard for them to make a case for a top seed in the NCAA tournament if they don't end up winning a decent number of games in the SEC play. And it's going to be difficult for them to make it to the NCAA tournament if they don't get to at least 8 or 9 wins in SEC play, because they don't have any good wins outside of anything that they pick up in SEC play. So like I said, I'm going to be very interested to see what Sam Purcell and Lady Bulldogs do. They've obviously played very well. They've beaten bad teams badly, but they've also just played bad teams. So like I said, I'll be very interested to see what happens with them as we go into SEC play for them. So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about Stranger Things. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the basketball teams just because, like I said, we'll find out a lot about both the men's and women's teams as we head into SEC play. But I do want to talk about Stranger Things. Stranger Things, the second volume of season 5, airs Christmas morning or Christmas Eve, not Christmas Eve, Christmas evening, I guess is the technical term that I'm looking for here. But I thought it was good. It's a little clunky at times. I'm not going to sit there and lie to you and tell you that it's perfect and that it is an absolutely perfect season of a television show. I wouldn't do that. But the one thing that Stranger Things does really well, and the reason why it has been my favorite show since it started way back in 2016, I guess, is because when it is operating at its highest level, it is so incredibly good. There are so many moments throughout the course of, even through these 3 episodes, that have quite a few flaws in them, but that are still just absolutely incredible to watch. I mean, one of the things that I loved about the first episode that we got in volume 2, after Will has had this incredible moment to end the first volume where he ends up channeling Vecna's powers and killing, I don't remember how many Demogorgons he ends up killing in the process, but he channels Vecna's powers, ends up doing to the Demogorgons what Vecna was doing to his victims in season 4. And he still is questioning himself. He's still saying, I'm not doing enough. And that's so incredibly important, because one of the things that they are doing is they are still trying to set up the fact that Vecna has a hold over Will, whether he realizes it or not. And the reason why he has a hold over him is because it's the doubt, it's the shame, it's the fear of not having done enough. And that's the one thing that Will is struggling with in that moment as we start episode 5, is he's looking at himself and he's saying, if I could have figured this out sooner, if I could have figured this out, even an hour earlier, all these kids wouldn't be with Vecna at this point. And these are the things that the show just does really, really well. And it's also really great to see, Mike coming to Will and just having that great moment of just happiness for him, because Mike hasn't really been as involved in the show throughout the course of these past few years. He's kind of taking a little bit of a jerk role, especially like in season 4. And we're kind of getting back to the Mike that we liked and the Mike that we loved in episode 5. We see that as we saw throughout the first 4 episodes. He's kind of taking more of a leadership role, which is what he was doing when this show first began. And now he's kind of taking that back over. And you like to see that from him. We also finally get, well, it doesn't happen in episode 5, but episode 5 continues when we're over in the Upside Down. It continues the tension between Dustin and Steve. And the one thing that I do like about this, because I know a lot of people haven't liked it, they do eventually pay it off. And I think by ratcheting up the tension as much as they do between these two characters who have bonded so much throughout the course of the last 3 seasons of the show, by forcing them to be at each other's throats, and even at one point even getting into a fight for the most part, you're forcing them to come to terms with the fact that there are issues in their friendship, and the fact that Eddie's sway over Dustin obviously bothered Steve, and the fact that it still is that his death is bothering Dustin so much is really bothering Steve. And look, it's not a good look for Steve, don't get me wrong, but that's one thing I like about Steve. He's always been a flawed character, even after he has his redemption moment there towards the end of season 1. He's always been a flawed character, and this is just another one of those flaws. But once he eventually realizes what he's done, how he's done it wrong, where he's been wrong, he comes around and he makes things better. So, like I said, they ratchet up the tension between these two in episode 5. and they'll pay it off in episode 6. And that's just one of the things that I think makes this work really, really well. It was just kind of strange to me to see, at the end of this episode, where we see Nancy and Jonathan, who have climbed the top of this building to the top of the research facility, and without knowing what that glowing bubble thing was, just decide to shoot it. That was kind of weird, but it does lead to a great moment in episode 6. And I was also very interested because one of the things that we saw in episode 4 at the end of it is Callie or Collie or however you pronounce her name, number 8, was joining the show again. We haven't seen her since season 2, and she's rejoining the show. And there's obviously some tension there. She's got a lot on her mind, obviously, because the fact that she was captured by Dr. K and the military. And I'll just be real honest with you. I wish we could have gotten rid of the military plot line at this point already. It's just the part that works the least. But she has to deal with this because the fact that she was captured by them, and she's basically relaying what all happened to her. And you see the fact that they're still doing the experiments. They're still doing the experiments on these. They're bringing women in. They're impregnating them, and they're trying to recreate the experiments that Brenner was doing back when we first started this show back in season 1. And she's having to deal with that. She's having to kind of be the person to relay this information to us. And it obviously brings a set amount of tension between her, 11, and Hopper, because Hopper is so incredibly protective of 11, and he doesn't want anything to happen to her. And he knows that this was a bad influence on 11 when she went off and found her sister in season 2. And this is obviously bringing up red flags. So episode 6 to me was the best episode. We get some really great moments in here. We do get the payoff of Steve and Dustin's constant tension when Steve is getting ready to go up and risk life and limb to try to save Jonathan and Nancy as the building was collapsing on them. We get the payoff of that tension. We get Dustin finally breaking down and saying, no, you can't go. You can't do this too. I can't lose you. I can't do this again. And it's this just emotional breakdown that we have with Dustin, who realizes, and who finally breaks down and lets Steve completely in on just how much Eddie's death hurts him, but also how much it worries him that the same thing will happen to his true best friend, and that is Steve. And like I said, this is the reason why I've been okay with all the tension and all of the backbiting and all of the sniping that Dustin and Steve have been doing throughout the course of the season, is because I felt like we would finally get a payoff on it, and we do here in episode 6. And that's one of the reasons why I was okay with the way that they were framing their relationship and the way that they were framing everything that they were doing throughout the course of the season. You get a wonderful moment between Nancy and Jonathan. It's in this potentially deadly situation where this building is collapsing on them, and this goopy resin stuff is like falling out all around them, and they don't know if they're going to live. And it's in that moment where you think that it will make their relationship stronger. What it does is, and it kind of does make their relationship stronger, but they realize that the trauma bond, the reason that they're together is because of the trauma bond that the two share. They come together, and it's hard to remember because it was so, 9 years ago. The reason that these two came together in the first place was because Nancy was trying to find her friend who had disappeared during season 1, and Jonathan was trying to find his brother. While it makes for great temporary relationships, it's almost not going to be something that you can build a lasting relationship on. And you get this wonderful moment where they are breaking up and they're ending their relationship. Do you believe they love them, that they love each other? Yes, you absolutely believe that, but they can't be together because they talk about this. It's bringing out the worst in each of them. Nancy drinks all the time and she gets drunk and she's kind of becoming an alcoholic. And then you got Jonathan, who stays high all the time and he's not really that likable of a person. And they're bringing out the worst of each other. And as much as they may love each other, they can't be together. And that's, I think, something that they had to come to grips and they had to realize. And during this moment when they might end up dying, they do come to that realization. And it's a great moment between the two of them. It's one of the better moments in the show this season. Like I said, I thought it was really, really good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I'll be very interested to see where they go from there. One of the things I like, though, about episode 6 is Sadie Sink. If you haven't pushed all your chips in on her, if you haven't said, if you're wondering who's going to be the biggest breakout star from this, I got all my chips in on Sadie Sink. I think she's got the potential to be just an absolute Hollywood star going forward. Now, look, she's going to be in. She's supposed to be in Spider-Man Brand New Day. I think she'll obviously have all the opportunities to do things like Marvel work and other genre type work. But if you're looking for somebody who has a chance to go and be an Oscar-winning actor out of all these people, look at Sadie Sink. I would say the same thing about Dustin, played by Gaten Matazzaro. I think is how you pronounce his last name. I just don't know if he's going to have the same number of opportunities that Sadie Sink will have, but he's going to be there as well. So, but great moments here in episode 6. The only problem you have with episode 6 is, as much as I enjoyed watching Holly and Max go through everything that they're figuring out, it does take a long time for them to get to the point where Max runs to her exit. And I think they could have had that conversation a lot earlier. And Holly runs to her exit as well. But it's a struggle to watch that, is because that Lucas is playing the song, running up that hill while Demogorgons are coming in on them. So like I said, I love what Sadie Sink does in that moment. I love the performance that she gives. So, but we finally do get Max back. She's back with the rest of the group, and going forward, what the rest of her role is going to be, I don't know, because she's kind of stuck in a wheelchair, as we saw throughout the course of episode 7, because she hasn't been moving or using her body at all for 18 months. So her body isn't working the way that it used to. Episode 7 it's a perfectly good episode. I can't remember the teacher's name. Mr. Carter, I think is his name. I can't remember what his name is, but he finally, after 5 years or 4.5 years, he finally gets to join the kids on hunting and investigating the Upside Down. So this was really fun to see. I'm glad that he is joining the team. That's going to be a fun thing to watch going into episode 7. The one thing I do want to talk about with episode 7, because I'm kind of running out of time. The one thing I want to talk about with episode 7 is the scene where Will comes out to all of his friends and everyone that is part of this Scooby gang, or whatever it is that you want to call them, where he comes out to them. And this is what I want. The reason I want to touch on this is simply because this is why it's important that these stories get told in television shows. It's why it's important that these stories get told in movies, because people like me, who, a straight white dude who doesn't understand everything that they go through, we need to see this. And I know that there are people who have been crapping on this, and one of the reasons that the show has been getting review bombed recently is because people are having really bad faith reactions to Will's coming out scene. And what I mean by bad faith, if you've ever heard that argue, if you ever heard somebody say it's bad faith arguments, the reason why, what that means is they determined they weren't going to like it because they just didn't want to see it. That wasn't something they wanted as part of their show. So whenever you're saying, I don't like a show that features any type of LGBTQ characters, or if they do a race swap or anything like that, that's a bad faith argument, because you're just completely shutting down the fact that you're going to have any enjoyment with it whatsoever because of one simple thing that you don't like anyway. Like I said, people like me need to see this, because the reason we have things like Pride Month, why you see a lot of LGBTQ people, they have to do what we saw with Will over and over and over again, because every time that they have to tell somebody that they're gay, that is a moment where somebody in their life that they love might decide now they hate them, and now they want nothing to do with them, and now they don't want to ever be around them anymore. And this is what they have to do every single time that they meet somebody new, or that they haven't told yet. And I think it's really important for people like us to see this, because if you're a straight person, you don't have to deal with that. Nobody's going to hate you because you're straight. That's just the expected thing. And for them to show this scene, and for them to show us how difficult this was for him, I thought it was really, really good. Now, there are some people who are not liking the fact that he does this in front of so many people, and there are so many opportunities for him to get hurt. The Duffer Brothers have said they tried doing it with just Joyce, and they tried doing it with a smaller group, but it just didn't really work. And for whatever reason, it didn't work. And I don't really know why. I wasn't there, obviously. But like I said, this is why it's important, is because we need to understand how difficult this is and how hard it is for them to do this. The fear that they have, and if you're saying it's not important, this is the thing, the argument I've seen with it. He's going to be able to beat Vecna because he's gay. No, that's not what it is. If that is the reason why you don't like this and you think that it's stupid, you haven't been paying attention to the storylines that they've been presenting throughout the course of the show so far. Vecna uses people's shame against them. He uses the things that they feel bad about. We saw throughout the entirety of episode 6, whenever Max is talking to Holly, that he was using her shame, the shame that she felt because she didn't defend her mother, the shame she was feeling because she didn't help defend Max when Vecna was choking her. He uses that shame against the people that he uses as his victims. And we'll recognize that he has shame, he has fear, and he has a secret about this. And the only way that he wasn't going to be able to let Vecna use that against him was if he went ahead and told everyone that this is who he was. And that's the reason why it's important to the story, regardless of whether you agree with the fact that they're putting, the storyline into the show. So, like I said, it is consistent with what they've been showing us throughout the course of really the 5 seasons. Whenever a character has these types of feelings, Vecna has the opportunity to take hold of them and use them against it. And that's the reason why this is just so incredibly important. So, all right, real quick, I want to talk about Pluribus, and then I've got to log off. Pluribus, if you didn't watch it, it wrapped up on Apple TV Plus this past week. I thought it was amazing. It's one of the better shows that I've seen in quite some time. It's Vince Gilligan. He did Breaking Bad. He did Better Call Saul. The 2 shows I actually have not seen, but because I wasn't watching a lot of TV when those shows started. But this was just really, really incredible. And I thought it was an absolutely phenomenal finale that we got here with Pluribus. We get Manusos and Carol coming together. And obviously, it shouldn't have been surprising that these 2 were going to butt heads and they weren't going to see things eye to eye. That just wasn't going to be the case. And they don't. They don't see things eye to eye. They have very different thoughts about everything that is going on and how they should approach, the potential end of the world. But what I liked about this, and one of the things I loved, is Carol had to see, and we, the viewer, had to see just the sinister nature of what this hive mind virus thing is, because we've seen these people interacting with Carol, with other people who were not infected, who weren't part of the hive mind, and they look amazing. They look like they're incredibly wonderful people. But when we get the opening of this scene, we get the young girl who has decided that she wants to join the hive mind. The hive mind is encouraging her, and they're doing all these things to uplift her and to be there for her. They're singing and they're chanting and they're doing all these things that help encourage her to start down this path. The moment she blacks out, the moment that she starts kind of doing that convulsing thing, when your mind is being turned over to the hive mind, everything stops. Yet they all just turn into worker bees. Yes, she has a smile on her face and maybe she is happy. I don't know. But the reason why I think this is so incredibly important is because we see that it's devoid of like any interaction. They're just performing tasks at this point. All the singing stopped. All of the happiness and emotion that we saw is gone at that point. The moment that there is no other non-infected people there, we lose all that happiness. And like I said, they're still smiling. I'm sure they might still be happy on the inside, but it's just task oriented. All right, we have to use release the animals to just trying to take care of the planet, and that's all they do at that point. And the goats, is basically just abandoned because they don't care about pets and they don't take pets, and they think that's a cruel thing. And the goat is, you can just tell the goat is devastated because the person who took care of it is now leaving it behind and doesn't want anything to do with it. And so, like I said, we see that sinisterness there, but then we get to the end and Carol comes to the realization that the hive mind is not going to let her just not be a part of them. They're just not. Carol probably should have seen this coming, but she thought, because even though they can't lie, they can hide the truth from her. Because yes, she says that unless she consented, they could not take the I can't remember what kind of sales they are, but they can't take those from her if she didn't consent. But what they didn't inform her was they had her frozen eggs, and they could create those cells with those frozen eggs. And this is a hard realization for her, because while she doesn't want to be a part of the hive mind, I think she was able to at least be able to experience some of what she had with her wife prior to this entire thing kind of kept falling down around her. And it just absolutely crushes her. And, the hive mind is, sitting there telling her, oh, we love you. We love you so much, we can't not let you be a part of us. And if we're going to, we have to bring you in. That's just how much we love you, despite the fact that she is telling them that, I don't want to do this. I don't want part of this. I don't want any part of this whatsoever. And they still don't. They don't care. They're going to continue to do what they do. They're going to try to make her a part of the hive mind, regardless of whether she wants it or not. And it's a great moment at the end of the episode where she is being flown back via helicopter with some large attachment to the bottom of the helicopter. You don't know what it is. But when Manusos asks her, what's in the box, and she says it's an atom bomb. And, it's referring back to what happened previously in the season. And this is basically her saying, you know what? I'm all in at this point. We're going to save the world. They don't know how they're going to do it at this point, but they're going to try to save the world. And it's just her and Manusos trying to figure this whole thing out. And that's one of the things that, like I said, the way that the show ends is absolutely perfect. I loved it. Thought it was just absolutely fantastic. Really, really enjoyed it. It's going to be one of my top shows of the year. So, all right. I want to go ahead and wrap up here. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Like I said earlier, I will be discussing the Duke Tomato Bowl for Mississippi State coming up later this week. I'll take a look at the college football playoff as well. And we will also take a look at the final volume. It's supposed to be like an hour and a half, 2 hour episode of the series finale for Stranger Things. So I'm hoping to have watched it by the time that I record again later on this week, but we'll just kind of have to see. So anyway, I appreciate you guys tuning in. And until next time, we'll talk to you then.